Good afternoon. I'm Dan Cooperman, and I want to welcome you to the first in our series of Development Essentials webinars presented by Opera America with our esteemed speaker and development expert, Marilyn Shapiro. Over the next 8 months leading up to our Opera Conference 2016 in Montreal, we'll be presenting several webinars focused on specific topics in the development portfolio. These are designed to help you in your daily work, so please let us know if there are specific topics you'd like us to address. Today we'll be focusing on the Performance Program Book and how you as fundraisers can make the most of this ubiquitous tool. We'll pause to take questions from you throughout the presentation as well as at the end. And you can submit questions following the presentation, during the presentation, by typing them in on your screen on the right-hand side. If you have any questions after this, feel free to send them by email. I want to thank the Dallas Opera, Los Angeles Opera, and Opera Philadelphia for allowing us to feature examples from their publications. And most importantly, I want to thank Marilyn Shapiro for joining us today. Marilyn's career spans 45 years of public service, including more than 30 years in senior management positions with Metropolitan Opera and Los Angeles Opera. She now works as an arts consultant, specializing in membership, patron, major gifts, and leadership giving, planned giving, development department structure, and governance. There really is no one more qualified to teach us how to raise money in opera. So thank you, Marilyn, for joining us.
I always like to start when I visit an opera company with the performance program, which is the most overlooked tool everyone has for raising money. Why is this so important? First of all, the performance program costs you nothing. Secondly, every ticket buyer has one, and most of your donors are going to come from the ticket buyer base. And people read it all the time, before the program, after the program, intermissions, they take it home. Sometimes they're posted, the performance program is posted on the website. So it's an enormous opportunity to get to your most important people at no cost to you. Some of the performance programs are small little booklets, some of them are bigger size. It's usually a function of the relationship with the publisher if you're part of a larger performing arts center. If you do your own, you have much more freedom as to size. And if that's the case, of course, I always vote for the 8.5 by 11 big size because there's more room to say things. But sometimes that's out of your control. It is also the main vehicle for donor recognition, which is so important, particularly at the upper levels of giving. The more people give, the more important recognition becomes. So for all these reasons, I always like to start with the performance program. It is also a window on how your company functions, your board structure, your donor structure. It's a window into your company. So that is the reason I start with all this. The first place that I want to talk about relative to the performance program is the process, which is often overlooked. Mentor of mine at the Met a long time ago said everything is a negotiation. And I know truer is the case for that than in the performance program and who gets how much space, because you're fighting with the artistic department who wants long bios, with advertisers who need the space and want it in prime locations. There are other parts of the house that need to be recognized. So the first thing that one has to do in the process of dealing with the performance program is for the development director or the most senior development person to be proactive with the general manager to establish the amount of turf you think you need to get your job done, and also to establish your perspective on how certain listings are done, what pages are used that can enhance development. There's a list of things that there needs to be an agreement with the general manager that you're going to get his or her backing when you work with the marketing people in order to get what you think you need in the performance program. This is no small thing, and most people go right to the marketing director or the PR director, and then you start the fight start there, and you never, it's just very attention driven. But if there's agreement from the top that development has its share of the performance program, the process is much simpler. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in terms of the performance program, if you want to get the most out of it, development people tend not to be sensitive to marketing department timetables, particularly with the performance program. The lead time is enormous for how they lay out the pages, when it has to go to the printer, all that kind of stuff. And it's keyed in by the date of the first performance, obviously. So the most important thing, for example, now is to find out what is the deadline for the next performance program that's going to be printed and the rest of the performance programs for the season. It is not too soon to start immediately after the last performance of the previous production to see how you want to use the performance program in the next production. It just takes a lot of time, and the marketing people, for their own reasons, legitimately so, can't wait for you. They have their problems and their deadlines, and so if you up front recognize that, the process of working with the marketing department will be much simpler. But there's nothing worse than rushing into the marketing staff and saying, okay, here are my donor names now, and I want this picture in, and they're already got the whole performance program set. That's not fair to them, and you're not going to get everything you want as a result. So the timetables are important. Sometimes you may have something special. One can investigate the cost of extra pages because it's a question of real estate and how much you can have. It's very expensive because you have to buy 4 pages. But sometimes it's done, but it needs to be for a good reason. Another option, if space is limited, which I like a lot, is a blow-in, which can contain whatever you feel is really important to bring to people's attention, and it could be very cheap, just not bound in but blown into the performance program. That's pretty easy to get done. So ahead of time, one has to have a plan, and a plan that you and the marketing staff agree to and that the general manager is aware of. Let's see if there's any questions here.
Sure. Does anyone have any questions at this point? All right, we'll keep going then.
Okay.
You can send in questions at any time, and I'll address them to Marilyn and pauses.
So now let's talk about the basic elements of the performance program and how you can use them to the best interests of the development department. All of these things that we're going to be talking to, I'm going to go back to make the point, they all have to be ready against the timetable. And if you don't get it done in time, it's not fair to blame the marketing department if everything doesn't get in. It's just that's the way it is. One way to smooth that over, if you will, is to make sure there's one person in the development department who's responsible for gathering all the materials for the performance program. And that person can be the key nudge of everybody. Do you have your program listings? Do you have the chairman's letters? All of that kind of stuff. That helps a lot. So if you think about a performance program, the first thing we usually see are letters of greetings. And so what we're going to show you are examples of before and after on ways in which to improve how you reach your audience when you open the book. The before slides that you're now looking at, the first one on the left, the greeting is from three people. That's not as strong as having the greeting from one person. The 2011 example is just a greeting from the chairman without a greeting also from the paid head of the company. The correction for that is the new way Philadelphia does its first pages is a greeting from the chairman, and that greeting covers donors and thank yous and appreciation and community and those kinds of things chairman of the board talk about. The second greeting is from David Devan, who's the general manager, and that talks more about the company and the repertoire and what's coming up and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes there isn't the space for both. Sometimes there's political reasons why you can't have both. So that varies from company to company. But ideally, it is a good idea to have two letters. The second area that we usually see in a performance program are the board listings. And that is, to some degree, peculiar. Each institution has its own culture. But you want your board listing to be very clear in terms of who the officers are and who the real board is, as opposed to a secondary board. A lot of organizations now have secondary boards, which they, as you can see in this example, there's one before that, I think. Some organizations list the board and then like the board of trustees on the same page. And
this one has it side by side.
This one has it side by side. It's better even if it's in the page. Another slide. Yep. Yeah, okay. So let's go back. But what this does is that, first of all, the Board of Trustees is on the right-hand page, which is the page that's the more important page in any book. It's the more expensive page for advertising because it's where the eye goes. And that undercuts seeing the board names. And people join boards for various reasons, but one thing is they're very proud of having their name as a member of the board, which implies they're generous to the company. And it gets undercut if there's a whole long list of people fighting with that list on the same page or next to it. So,
and in this case, the Board of Trustees is the secondary board.
And they give, usually it's around $10,000. And boards are giving $25,000, $30,000 and $50,000, and their names are sort of being diluted, for want of a better word of describing it, in the performance program, which gets in the way of recruiting board members. So this was changed, as you can see, and
in this case, the Board of Trustees follows on the page afterwards.
Yeah.
So it becomes.
So the board is on the right-hand side of the book.
Right.
And when you open it up and you see the right-hand side of the book with the board, it's obviously catches the eye easily and gives more prominence to the people who are being listed. And then you can put the other secondary board on the second page. But I've often seen very frequently to have both of these kinds of boards on the same page, and it really so undercuts the board members who are generous.
Do we have any questions about board listing or board representation in program books? Okay, we'll keep going then.
One thing I'd like to point out is that just in terms of board structure, most boards, some boards have a chairman and some boards have a chairman and a president. If there isn't a paid president running the opera company, I urge strongly the creation of a volunteer president position, because it gives you a second important hat to work the room to solicit donors to represent the company. Often the division of labor between the chairman and the president is one person does more of the business function and the other one does more of the representational function. It's been that way at the Met for years, and it works very well. And I always wonder when I see that hole open and nobody getting that hat when there isn't a paid president. Such a waste, because it really is a terrific way to reward somebody who's important to the company, who is generous and could be more generous, and is a great help to fundraising.
We'll move now into the next section, which is donor listings. And as Marilyn is talking, if any questions occur to you, feel free to type them in and we'll address them at the end of this little section. This is another example.
This is another example. This is Philadelphia before and after. You can see in the after that they stack the names of the officers. And if there's room, that's a really nice thing to do, because again, it's a way to express appreciation to your most important leadership.
All right, on to the donor listings.
The main problem that I usually find with donor listings is that they're running the performance program from top to bottom. Often they go down too low. They go down to like $250, which may work for smaller companies, but for larger companies, I think takes up space. But mainly what I find is that when listing donors, they're not listed in sections of importance. So the membership type categories in one place with its own header, patron program, let's say up to 25,000 in its own place with on the top of the page, and then the leadership categories on its own pages. Now, depending on how many donors you have at the higher levels would affect how you isolate these higher level pages. But putting everybody together from top to bottom, because there are more names toward the bottom, minimizes the importance of your most important people. So it is really very important, I think, to list separately on a new page your upper level categories. It may be in one or two places. And this example we're looking at is from Los Angeles Opera, and this is their donors, 50,000 and up.
Maybe 100.
100,000 and up. You may not have that many at that level, so you might have this page be 50,000 and up in your company, or even 25,000 and up. But what this page says is these are the people who are the most generous to the company and whose support you want to recognize first. It's a simple thing to do, but it goes a long way to encourage people to think of where they think their name should be. Also, in recruiting board members and getting board members to give at the proper level, it's amazing how embarrassed people start getting when they don't see their name in the right place when they're on the board. So it's a way to go to board members and say, we really need you in the artistic excellence circle. It's a way to get people to increase their giving. And so this is still with LA. This is now going lower down a page. That's just the Opera Council, which is their donors 25,000 or more. And happily, they have enough to fill a page.
The font gets smaller several pages later.
And notice that their dollar amounts by each category. I'm finding people in some opera companies or performing arts organizations seem to be embarrassed to put the dollar amounts in. And that's usually a function of the board because they don't want people to know how much board members give by looking into the donor listings. If you don't know what the donor listings category minimum donation is, it's very hard to find out what the board is doing. And I think people need to know where they stand and what's expected. And there's nothing embarrassing or inappropriate to put numbers in a performance program. But sort of in the old way to do things, it's not considered polite. But opera needs a lot of money, so I don't think we can afford that. And here's the Philadelphia program, and similarly, their older program had everything on one page.
I'm going to talk about the giving chairs.
Yeah, well, I think it's very nice if you can to have somebody to chair the specific categories of giving, patron, 25,000 and up, particularly because that person can then sign a lot of the letters and acknowledgments and come to events and be the face of the program. I've just worked with an opera company that doesn't have that, and they sort of wonder why their numbers are drifting off and drifting away. And I think part of it is people want to be with their peers, and although they're really happy to be with the general manager or the artistic director or the head of the young artist program, when it comes to basic giving and basic thank you and cultivation, it really needs to come from the key volunteer people, and this sends a signal in terms of who that leadership is. It also is less work because this means the chairman doesn't have to sign everything, and it gives you more workers in key positions. So that program, as you can see, the Philadelphia program was changed. And now they have the leadership gifts on one page. And then go to the next page.
There's smaller gifts.
There's smaller gifts, yeah. So now sometimes there isn't space, and this is where negotiations come in. You just have to have enough space to be able to lay things out that way.
Where should you list institutional funders, foundations?
Yeah, well, I like to put them in where they belong by the level, because it makes those categories bigger. So you see in this example we're looking at, you have Mellon, Penn, and Whitcock Foundation filling up the $1 million circle. So you have $4 million donors that way. If those foundations were pulled out, you'd only have one. So I like to, and there you see Goldsmith, Knight, same thing lower down. But I've also seen it done that you run it through your listings, but then have a separate page that says foundations and corporations. And that's really important for corporations because, of course, they need to see their name recognition is so important for corporate support. So I don't have any problem double listing those organizations. One of the things that's tricky is that many people give through a family foundation, so that it's really individual giving. It's not a professional foundation. So I've seen those listed separately, which then gets very confusing. If people use their personal foundation to give money, it should stay in the individual giving listing type. Save the institutional listings for the professional foundations and government. And it can go, I prefer to see it in the back after individual giving, but if there may be reasons to put it first. I don't feel very strongly about it. It's just every culture is different.
Well, no questions have come in yet on that section, so we might as well keep going. Just as a reminder, if you have questions, feel free to type them in on the side of your screen. There should be a questions area, and they'll show up here, and you can have Marilyn answer them. So now we'll move on and take a look at some other ways that donors can be recognized.
One of the areas, of course, is the title page of the performance program, where you list the cast and the opera. It is preferable, and it's kind of complicated to have a rule, to have the title page on the right-hand side of the page. Again, as I was saying before, the right-hand side of the page is where people's eyes go. So if you look at the Everest performance program, my preference would have been to have Everest on the right and the other page on the left, which then recognize the donors. And I can't tell if there are donors on page 2.
No, all the donors here are on the right side.
Okay, sometimes if you take, this is the LA Opera title page, their major donors are on the title page, and supplemental donors are elsewhere or in smaller type. If we go back to the one before, so on Everest, if there are major donors, they could go on the Everest page, and then the others would get a secondary page. And like the season presented by Texas Instruments could go on the title page, because it's obviously a very generous gift. But the main thing is you want to be able to get that title page on the right-hand side. Some opera companies, this is an example from Philadelphia, do a blow-in, which is really excellent if you're willing to pay for it and everybody agrees it's okay, because it's a terrific way to have donors stand out. And now with a lot of opera companies underwriting singers and other kind of pieces, gives you more room to list people. So that's sort of the title page. So what we're looking at now is what else can you use the performance program for? One thing is definitely promotion of your program, of your giving programs, and of your people who are giving. Many performance programs forget to do that. These two slides we're looking at is examples of ways to recognize very generous donors who usually are involved with the production that this performance program represents. Sometimes it's generous donors who make just a general gift. Sometimes it's somebody who died who's very important to the company. But development needs some room in the performance program to show examples of generous giving with real people. And that's what these two slides represent. This slide represents, from Dallas Opera, a listing of how you can give to Dallas Opera. A lot of performance programs do not include um, they don't include ways to give. There's usually not a lot of room, but I've seen it done with a side panel. I've seen it done half a page. It's important to remind people that the ticket only covers now probably less than half, 50% of the seat of the performance per person. So it's really important to remind people that how important giving is to the health of the company, and also to remind them of the privileges that they would get if they participate or increase that participation. So this is one example of that. And this is another example of that in Philadelphia. It depends on how much room you have. This one also shows a special listing for the Plain Giving Society, which most companies now have as its own page, which is very, very helpful.
How should people go about including other campaigns in their books?
That depends on the politics of the campaigns and the institution. It shouldn't be in the middle of listings. It either has to be ahead of the general listings with a clear definition of what the campaign is, and preferably that it's over and above annual giving, so people don't get confused as to, if I give to this campaign, how does that relate to my annual gift to the opera? The annual gift to the opera is something that needs to be very stable. Otherwise, all you're doing is cannibalizing your giving. So that, I think, depends on the organization and what the special campaign is. And what's this? This is just other things you can talk about, I guess, in the performance program. Gala's coming up next season.
How important is it that the program book reflect your organization's brand and spirit and giving persona?
Well, of course, that's very important. And that gets wrapped around anything that's in the performance program. But the main thing is that how you use the performance program needs to be very clear. And the different components in it need to stand out and enhance the giving process, among other things. So there are a few other miscellaneous things that I would like to point out. One is, I had mentioned the blow-in, which we just talked about. You also can use an outer wrap, which I've seen done for opening night for a special gala, which gives you room to give special recognition to people who are supporting the gala. And usually one is raising enough money that it's worth spending the money to do that. I've also seen that done as a blow-in, but that's something that is, it's really funny to go to a big gala, come into the performance, and everybody's saying, well, what's going on? And then the people who are supporting this very gala evening aren't recognized until the dinner. And so you're denying them more recognition, which of course enhances the giving. The other thing I just want to mention is that when you talk about donor recognition, the more people give, the more likely donor recognition is going to be important. They've got their dress rehearsals, they have good seats, they're fussed over. So where they are in the performance program, how their name is listed, can you read their name, is it in the right place, becomes increasingly important the more a person gives. Also, on the membership reply card, which most of you use for your programs, it's really important to remember to put the line in, I want my name listed as, to remind people about program listing, and then you put in where it starts and asterisk or something like that.
Well, now's the time to ask questions if you have them. I'll lead off by asking one. Marilyn, you talked about using a wrap or a blow-in to highlight a gala.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever use the program book to recognize people after a gala?
Oh yeah, that's where all the so-called vanity pictures are that we just saw before. And the problem is that sometimes it's such a long lead time that you'll see an opening night photos in a May program. But there's nothing you can do about that. That's just the way it is.
Got a quiet group. Let's see. Any questions? Anyone out there have questions? Is there anything else you want to add? Do you want to talk about, you talked about the size of a program book. Do you want to talk about the feel and the paper?
Well, yeah. As I recall, when I started working with Opera Philadelphia, the performance program, the quality of the paper was thinner. And obviously, if you have options, you know, heavy coated paper always is better. You want it to be big enough so you can read the names. And of course, if there's a way to have it 8.5 by 11 size, that gives you lots of room and lots of space. But if you're part of a performing arts center and there's a communal performance program contract, you often don't have a choice. So that's a function really of each organization and how their performance program works.
Well, if there are no questions, we will call it an afternoon. But please, if questions do come up, feel free to send them to me by email, dcooperman@operaamerica.org. We'll be happy to answer them and help you out as you're working on your programs moving forward. I really want to thank you, Marilyn, for joining us today and helping us work on this element of the development portfolio. We'll have you back in the next couple months for a few more of these. So for all of you out there, stay tuned and keep watching the development listserv for upcoming dates. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.